Hi, this is Henk, and welcome to another edition of the Skull Sessions. And today, my guest is Brad Goldberg. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Hi. Hi, Dan.
So, man, let's talk about what you have going on.
Well, right now I'm working on the audio version of my books, Z versus V. There's two of them. I've finished one of them, and I'm sort of going through the technical specs to get it ready to upload. The second one will be a while, so they should both be available perhaps in a month on Amazon, on the same page with the print and Kindle versions.
Okay. And what are the books about?
The books are set in Manhattan to start with. The narrator, Kyle, has been trapped there. There's well, this was written before COVID, but there is a pandemic. I mean, I started it before COVID. And it has two manifestations, zombies and vampires. So he's fighting both of these. New York, Manhattan has been sealed off in an attempt to block the pandemic, but it was government stupidity because it was already spreading all over the world. Nobody really knows where it started. The main character is he's just trying to survive. He's a little bit of, I don't know, pessimistic. And then he discovers this girl hiding, a 10-year-old girl hiding in the basement of the apartment he's been using to survive. And what the girl doesn't know is the night before they met, Kyle had killed her mother because she was a zombie trying to kill him. So he feels responsible for having orphaned her and makes it his mission to get her out of Manhattan to a safer place. He doesn't even know if that exists. And so the two books are their journey, their attempts to get off the island. Along the way, in book two, one of his former colleagues, he had been worked at a cable news station in Manhattan, and his producer shows up, and she's just this kick-ass woman that takes charge and actually does manage to, spoiler alert, get them off the island, although they don't necessarily get to a safer place. They think they did, but as sometimes goes in fiction, doesn't work out the way they expect it.
Right. Yeah, no, you see that a lot in everything from like The Walking Dead to all sorts of kind of apocalyptic dystopian tales, like
Yeah.
Last of Us or whatever. So you're saying that there's kind of a plague of like vampires and zombies. Do we know what it is? Are they the same thing? What's going on?
We're not sure because all the investigators get killed previous to the opening of the book. My thought was not to try and explain things too much because I find that when you try and explain something that's more or less impossible, the more you work at it, the stupider you sound. So I basically just say it exists, say they don't really know whether it's, one virus or two. I just wanted to give it sort of an organic origin so that it had, because I'm dispensing with all of the lore. I've made up my own creatures. The vampires are not your, traditional vampires with castles in the old country or anything. Basically, they're just vicious killers who want blood, live on blood. The zombies are pretty brainless, and they will just rip flesh off of anything they find. I sort of also dispense with any supernatural explanations. So they die. You don't need, silver bullets or wooden stakes. You just, is it all right to swear on this?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. In the book, I say basically you just need to kill the fuck out of them.
Right.
And that'll do it. So, but um, they are both vicious, and it also talks about how Twilight's the most dangerous time of day. That's where the book opens because the zombies can still see and the vampires are coming out. So you have to deal with both of them.
Are the vampires a little more cognizant, a little bit more like self-aware? And
They,
the Good.
yeah, I was going to say they are. And in fact, what happens is that they start to create their own society and use again, this is a bit of a spoiler. This happens in book two, but they start to control. um, the zombies and use them as an army of the dead. And then another element that shows up pretty early in the book is that Chloe, the girl, Chloe's father, had turned into a vampire and he wants his daughter. He wants to turn her. So he is constantly pursuing them.
You
Chloe,
know what
go
this
ahead.
kind of reminds me of? It's not a ripoff because it's like quite a bit different, but it's some of the like same sort of tendencies as Daybreakers. Have you seen the movie?
I have not seen that, but
It's a good movie, but it's like I would say it's a well done B movie.
okay.
You know, but it has like it's a world that like basically gets you know some people that are like normal people, but it basically gets taken over by vampires.
Hmm.
And some of the vampires are you know they're more sentient, they're more interactive, and some are just basically mindless zombies.
Right.
And,
Right.
and the main guy, like one of his kids, is still normal. And yeah, I don't want this to be all about that movie, but
Sure.
it seems like they kind of have a little bit of similarity.
I'm sure I'm borrowing from a lot of the work that's gone before me. I mean, I didn't consciously imitate anything, but obviously,
Right.
um,
Well, I'm not saying they're the same.
yeah,
I'm just saying
yeah,
that they're like they seem like there are a bunch of things like with the whole like zombie lore and the whole like vampire lore, and you can bring up things like you know you can bring up like 28 Days Later. You can bring up like all
right.
sorts of stuff. You know, so it's like I don't think it's so much it's all an original concept.
Mhm.
I think it's how you do it. So it could be like I like George Romero didn't make up the zombie thing, you know.
Right.
You know, Anne Rice didn't make up the vampire thing. It's like it's how you do it.
Yeah, and I hope I've done it well. I hope people are entertained by it. That's my main goal is basically to make people feel it was worth their time to read it, and enjoy it along the way. Get a little scared, have a few laughs because there is humor in it. The narrator is, very self-deprecating, and there are times when he, is funny, I hope. And But obviously I couldn't ignore what went before me, and I make reference to it in the book where I say, "Hey, you thought you knew what was going on, but let me tell you what's happening in this world," so that people aren't. There'll probably be some purists who'll say, "Well, you can't do that because zombies are always like this and vampires are always like that." Well, um,
Well,
all
you always get Karens that like it sticks to some strict structure
yeah,
that doesn't really exist because they're all fictional creatures.
right,
Like you know,
right,
like George Romero's zombies might not be the same as like I don't know that you know Dan O'Brien's in Return of the Living Dead. You know,
yes.
it doesn't really matter just how well you do it.
Well, I hope I've done it well, and since if people are watching, they can see that I'm not a young person. I was going to school in Pittsburgh while George Romero was making Night of the Living Dead. And he has a part in the movie as a newscaster, but he was the late night horror film host, Bill Cardille. He went by Chilly Billy Cardilli. Every Saturday night, I'd come home from whatever I was doing, and he'd be on late at night talking about this movie that he was involved with. And I had no idea, of course, that it was going to become basically the basis for an entire remake of a genre. The George Romero sort of created the modern zombie movie, and a cult classic, well deserving of that.
It's one of those spurts, like you see spurts of like basically similar incarnations of the same thing, but
Yeah.
usually a little bit less. Like I remember when he came out with Dawn of the Dead, which to this day is one of my favorite movies. There were a whole bunch of zombie movies, like Zombie Lake, like you know,
Yeah.
all these movies that were nowhere near as good, but were trying to buy up the zombie craze.
Yeah. Well, Dawn of the Dead is the one that takes place in the mall, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So Monroeville Mall, but sadly, just this year closed. And I think there was a tribute to Dawn of the Dead when they were closing the doors, like a tour that made reference to the movies. But that was a thriving mall when I was there.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So getting back to your work for a minute, is there a resolution at the end? Do you kind of find out what's going on?
There is a resolution, although there's a resolution that does end the story, but leaves it open to a third book, which some people are asking me to write. I have not started it. I have a vague idea of how it might go. And one of the reasons is I just got involved in another project, which is a whole different genre. It's a historic thriller, which I've now finished, and I'm shopping that to agents and things. But you don't find out exactly what the cause is. If there's a third book, I'm hoping to find out how to end it. Something I'm working on now so that I know where I'm going with it. But there is definitely a resolution, and it's a surprise. I think it's something that's set up along the way, but I don't think you'll see it coming until it happens.
Okay. So it's kind of like a not a full ending, but it's like enough of an ending to kind of bring stuff to a close so people feel like there's, it doesn't just like venture off into like the wild. Like that was one of the problems people had with The Walking Dead. Is like
Mhm.
after a while it just seemed like it kind of like beat the same dead horse again and again and
Yeah.
again. And there was no resolution, there was no progression, there was nothing. So you're saying there's like a little bit of kind of like a progression denouement where you like bring it a little bit to a close, but you don't seal it off.
That correct. There's a major event towards the end of the second book that resolves the story that's been going on, but then sets up. Uh, I mean, it sets up something that you look at, you realize, well, something more could happen, but I'm satisfied at this point. And if he doesn't write the third book, I'm not going to go, what what happened?
Right. Yeah, I try and say like I have a number of books out, and like I take to kind of the cosmic horror genre. That's my go-to. But
Mhm.
I see they're all like vaguely related. Like it's like Mad Max or Road Warriors. Like you don't have to read one to read the other.
Right.
Is that kind of the way you're proceeding?
Yeah, in fact, originally the two books were written as one, and then the publisher, Raventail Publishing, they've been great for me. Their audience likes novella length works more, so they asked me to split it up into two books. So I found a pretty good ending for the first book, in sort of right in the middle of the story, and I didn't want to do a previously on. So if you just start reading book two, whenever something comes up where it's a reference to something that happened in the first book, I I talk about it as if this is just new information. Make sure that whatever you need to know about what's going on is clear, even if you haven't read the first one. I prefer, of course, that people read both of them, but if you just want to find out how it comes out, you can start at book two.
Yeah, I should just say that if you read my earlier books, it's like you get more backstory, but it's like not necessary for you to understand what's going on.
Right, right. And I wanted people to be able to enjoy each one on its own. So when I was presenting them as two books, the first one was fairly easy. I just need to make sure that the ending felt like an ending. The second one took more work because I had to make sure that if I referenced something that you would have known if you read the first book, but hadn't, it still is clear. But so as far as I can tell, they should work no matter which way you take them.
Roughly how long are both of them? Like if I noticed like back in the day, like a novel was like usually like 300 to 500 pages. You
Right.
know, now novels often will be like 190 pages. Like back in the day, that would be a novella, but now that's kind of the way things are.
They both are around 55,000 words, which in the format they're printed is about 180 pages.
Okay. And you use like one and a half spacing, double spacing, like 12.5, 10.5. I know like it's probably because I'm getting older, but like, now like they used to print stuff in like, tiny little 10.5 with like single line spacing. Like I can barely see that now.
Well, since it's printed as a book and not as a typewritten thing, but it doesn't look like it's that hard to read. It's probably maybe 13 to 14 points on the page. I mean, when I wrote it, I wrote it standard format, which was, New Times Roman, 12
Right.
point, double space, 1 inch margins. But the book is, the format that the publishers laid out. So
Okay. Do you tend to stick with first person, third person? Some people mix up a little bit.
this is a first person narration. And it's all the same narrator except for one sequence, which I can't explain why I changed narrators, but there's a couple chapters in the second book that are a different narrator, but it's all first person. And for some reason, I didn't have an outline. I didn't even have a story when I started. I just had an idea for the opening page, and I started writing. And one of the reasons I did that, and one of the reasons I picked this genre was I wanted to be able to. I was starting to have more time on my hands. Work was slowing down. I was getting, you know, closer to stopping doing what I had been doing. And I just wanted to be able to start writing. I knew if I had to do an outline or do a lot of research, would take forever and never get started. So I just said, I have this idea. It was actually suggested accidentally by my daughter. She came home from college and said, "Pop quiz, Dad, zombies or vampires?" And I said, "Why choose?" And that idea just sat in my head. And so I knew that I just wanted to write something where they both existed. And I sat down at page one and started writing and not knowing where I was going. But as I wrote, what was right in front of me started to become clear, and the horizon became like started to come into focus, but it was always out there. And then somewhere along the line, I know where this whole story is going, and was able to write it. And I had to go back, fill in some things that I hadn't set up, but I think it turned out I was I was as surprised as the reader will be as to where it went.
Okay. So like there's some people that say they call themselves a pantser. So they're kind
Yeah,
of like, they go by the seat of the pants. And some people do a more like thorough outline. Where would you say you fall in that?
I've done well for this book. It was definitely a pantser. I mean, I just sat down and started writing. I've written two other novels, but one of them was based on a screenplay that I had written years ago. So I had kind of an outline for that. But as I was going along, I knew I had to like develop characters more, give some of the secondary characters their own stories. And the most current book was, since it's historic fiction, and I'm surprised when I go over it how many of the characters are real people. I had to do a lot of research, and I tried to keep it as. I mean, obviously, it is fiction, but I wanted to make sure wasn't really violating the biographies of the people I was writing about. So
That's what you're currently working on, the historical fiction as opposed to the zombies and vampires and invasion sort of thing. Okay.
yeah, yeah, it's. I mean, I can talk about that, although fans of horror won't find it that interesting, perhaps. But it's involves Theodore Roosevelt when he was police commissioner in Manhattan, and Nellie Bly, who at the time was the most famous probably the most famous reporter in the world, but she was known for her investigative reporting. She had got in order to get a job because no New York paper would hire a woman. They say, "Oh, we already have a woman. We don't need to cover any more weddings and flower." Anyway, it
Mm.
was much more serious than that. And one of the newspapers, The World, said, "Well," the editor said, "Well, get yourself committed to Blackwell's Island, which was the most notorious asylum in the country, and then come out and write about it." She said, "Well, how are you going to get me out?" "Ah, don't worry, we'll think of something."
Uh,
I mean, I think that was really it. So she came out and wrote 10 Days in a Madhouse, which it just became a sensation to the point where there were commissions in the city to look into the asylum, and they increased the budget. So my book picks up about 8 years after she wrote that. It's in the middle of Roosevelt's term as police commissioner, and there is a series of gruesome murders that seem to be staged in such a way as to refer to the kinds of abuse that Nellie Bly wrote about. So Roosevelt has to, well, it doesn't have to, but decides it makes sense to bring her in to help investigate. And as the story progresses, some of the powerful liquor forces, because he's trying to enforce, this gets a little into the politics. Basically, he's he's on a campaign of reform. The people who don't want reform to happen because they'll lose money take over these murder. They find the murderers and use it to blackmail Roosevelt. They kidnap Nellie Bly, and basically he ends up with the choice of giving up his career or saving her life.
Okay. Would you say it's kind of like I always try and compare stuff, not to say like you ripped it off, but to say if you like this style or you like this format or you like this revelation, you'd also like my stuff. So would you say it's kind of along the lines of like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that's sort of like is a shock what's really going on?
I wouldn't say One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest because that takes place entirely, in the asylum. It. I would compare it to The Alienist, if people like that, or the Golden Gilded Age, which is on television currently. I think it's between seasons, and there's a couple other historical thrillers. There was one time at well, Time After Time involved time travel. The 7% Solution, which took a fictional character, Sherlock Holmes, and combined him with, and I forget who the real life character was in that one, but it's the idea of trying to really create the time that it takes place in, but also tell the story that it's not like dry history, that the story itself propels the adventure and the suspense and the thrill.
Would you say that's also first person?
No, that's a third. This is third person. I don't have a first person. There are two. Um, I mean, that somebody could narrate it, but there are scenes that no one person is in every scene. So, it would either have to switch narrators pretty frequently, or and I also wanted a perspective of being able to describe what's going on historically to a degree, and sort of and having the narrator be a little bit the voice of authority.
Okay, and you said that this is commissioned work. It's like the new story you're working on is for someone else.
No, no, no. I finished the novel and now I'm trying to get an agent for it.
Right.
So I hope I'm so that's the current status of that, is to try and get it on the market. It's a little bit more um, but general audience. The zombies and vampires are very genre, and I love it. I had a great time writing it, and if I do book three, I'll love being in that world again. But this is much less genre. It's more for a general audience. So
General consumption. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and I find that like if you're a good author, it doesn't really matter what you write. Like Richard Matheson wrote like a Western story,
yeah,
and he's an awesome author. So it might not have been like I Am Legend or Story of Echoes, but
right,
it was a great read.
yeah. I mean, Stephen King is known for his horror, but if you read The Life of Chuck, even though there's a little bit of, this, I don't know if you've seen it or read it, there's a little bit, it's the end of the world, but it's not the horror of the end of the world. It's one of the sweetest, most engaging movies and books that I've seen and or read recently. It's really lovely. If you haven't seen it, it's available streaming. It's so that's just it's the Stephen King of Stand By Me, the Stephen King of the Green Mile or
That's
Shawshank.
exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, he's a good author and he weaves a good tale. So if you weave a good tale, it doesn't matter necessarily whether it's horror, whether it's sci-fi, whether it's reality, as long as you do it well.
I agree. I agree. And I have written in a number of different genres. I have short stories that they're some of them are speculative fiction. Some of them are just sort of like Twilight Zone-ish that is, you don't exactly it's just got a twist at the end. I mean, I was a big fan of Ambrose Bierce,
Oh yeah.
who and
I'm
he
a big fan of his and a big fan of Lovecraft's. And I really like the Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits. I remember when
yeah.
like now they're old, but I remember when they
Yeah.
came out, they like blew boundaries, like people could not believe.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, this it clearly puts me at a certain age, but I wrote a spec script that was about a half hour, and when in the '80s when they rebooted the Twilight Zone, I just sent it to them, and they said they couldn't use that script, but they called me in to pitch, and there was this guy I had never heard of who was the story editor, who was very nice. The other story editor kind of did more of the talking, and he just sat behind his desk. That guy was George R. R. Martin. So,
Now Game of Thrones is huge, but like
yeah,
he actually has like a long history of like relevant work behind him. People don't really realize because they're like, oh, Game of Thrones.
yeah, yeah. No, he had. I mean, well, he had written a lot, I guess, for animation for a while, and then he had a bunch of books at the time. I did look him up after I met him and realized he had written a lot. So, and then the show got canceled before we ever came up with something for me to write. So, there you go.
That kind of seems like that seems the way to go. Like the classic stuff was all canceled way too early, like Firefly or like Star
Yeah,
Trek. It was always like an accident, like a change of guard or something.
exactly. So my daughter works for Roddenberry Productions, which is Gene Roddenberry's son, and I went to her office one day. They have the captain's chair from the original Star Trek, right, or one of them anyway. So I sat in it, and somebody took my picture. I didn't realize I was wearing a red shirt. So everybody said, you know you're going to die, Brad, right? But anyway, that I we when the original Star Trek was on, it was one of those. There were like three or four shows that in my day you had to go to the common room to watch television. People didn't have laptops and things like that, and if you didn't get there early,
By
it was
day two, I'm 53, so I
okay.
remember when we had the family TV.
Yeah, so you had, if you didn't get there early enough, you were standing way in the back and could barely see the TV. But Star Trek was one of the ones that you showed up 45 minutes, a half an hour before the show started, or you weren't going to be able to see it.
Well, I think the last note that I'll say because we should get back to you, but
Okay.
I think as far as Star Trek, I think it's my favorite way of being groundbreaking. Like they'd have pointed social commentary, like the first interracial kiss and stuff like
Oh
that,
yeah.
but they weren't preaching to you. Like it just happened. You just seemed natural.
Right. Right. And I mean, I know because I have a little bit of insight inside there is this aesthetic, and I don't know if they can articulate it completely, but it is this Star Trek world, and they kind of know if they're violating it, right? That there aren't specified rules as far as I know, but there's a certain feeling, and a lot of that has to do with Gene. I mean, one of the things I liked about the one of the more current ones, which is Strange New Worlds, is that it's really the original Star Trek, except with better special effects. But the storylines, the morality, all of that, the interracial cast, it all just seems like you're watching what could have been an original Star Trek script, except the special effects are very modern.
Right. Well, like I said, like as long as commentary is woven into the story, so it
Mhm.
doesn't feel like they're preaching to you, it just feels like a natural regression. I think it's a lot stronger. And like for most people, it's like way more acceptable because it makes them think. As opposed to them feeling they're being preached to by a
Right.
choir, they're like, "Well, wait a minute, I didn't consider that." So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a good point. Like I don't know if you saw The Last of Us.
Oh yeah.
And there's a scene where like one of the main characters, or not one of the main characters, but one of the main characters for that episode turns out to be gay. You know, he's like kind of a redneck guy, but he turns out to be gay. And I tattooed. And I remember we were watching that, and like the guy's tattoo was like, "Ah, come on!" I'm like, "Just watch it. Like it all makes sense. It's a good episode." By the end of the episode, he was about to cry.
Oh, that was basically a standalone episode, right? They
Right.
only vaguely tied into the ongoing story, and it was wonderful. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember the guy from Parks and Recs was one of the characters. I'm
I'm
not.
just saying, like, it was
Yeah,
very well told, which is
yeah,
like, it didn't feel like it was preaching to you, it just very well told. So I like
yeah,
that.
yeah. That was a great episode. I wish they hadn't killed what's his name so early. Oh, spoiler in the second second
See,
season.
I haven't watched the second season. I heard the second season is not that good.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. And part of it is losing one of the main characters. The story is sort of, and I guess that's true to the game, but it kind of leaves you not as invested.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. HBO's been like they've been canceling a lot of stuff. Like I was watching Raised by Wolves, and then
Mhm.
it got through two seasons, and then suddenly it's gone. I was
Yeah.
like, where is it going? What's happening? But all right, so let's get back to you for a minute.
Okay.
So, how can people get a hold of you? How can they order your stuff? How can they throw money at you?
Well, anytime I'm outside, if you see me, throw some money. I'm fine with that. So the books are available on Amazon. Z versus V, Among the Living, or you can just look up my name, Brad Goldberg. But my website also it has information about my current project, but also links to this, and that's bradleygoldberg.com. BradleyGoldberg.com. And there's everything there that you need to know about me, and probably some things you really don't care about.
So that's your website, correct?
That's my website. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and what do you have available on that? Can people like order signed books from you? Do you have like any swag that you offer?
I haven't figured out how to do signed books over the internet. If you have any suggestions, I'd be open to it. That'll there's a I don't have swag. There's just basically a link to the Amazon pages for each book.
I
And
find that when I do conventions, that's when I sell signed books.
yeah, yeah.
And I also occasionally I'll do something like a Kickstarter or some crowdfunding campaign where I'm like, I draw as well, so I'm like, I'll do a little illustration and sign it for you, and it'll be like signed and numbered, you know,
Oh wow.
and that way people like they put in a little bit more money because they get a unique package. But
Yeah.
yeah, I know there's one guy that I talked to that's like, yeah, everything you should buy from me through my website. I'm like, isn't that a little bit more expensive? You have to
Right.
get it shipped to you, that you sign it, that you ship it to the person. And that person seemed to think that was the way to go. I was like, that wouldn't work for me.
Yeah. Well, I have done a couple conventions, and I will be at Worldcon 52, whatever, in Los Angeles at the end of August because I live in Los Angeles. So if you're going to be in Los Angeles in August and you're going to Worldcon, uh, find me. I don't know if I'll be. I haven't. They haven't assigned who gets to actually do signings there. Hoping to get on a couple of panels, but I'll definitely be there. So
Yeah, I find panels and readings are like a godsend.
yeah.
They're like they really help people get to know you. When people
Mhm.
know you, then they buy your stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. Weirdly, the last convention I did was a couple of weeks ago in LA. I sold one book at the convention, but on the train home, I sold two.
Yeah, it's weird. You'll have like one day where you sell 10, then nothing
Yeah.
else for the other 2 days.
Yeah.
You're like, what's going on? But yeah, like I said, I find that readings really help because like I'll sell nothing, do a reading, then sell out.
Right, right. With the actually, if you are in Los Angeles, the other place that you can get my book is the Last Bookstore in Studio City, not the Last Bookstore downtown. For those who live here, you know what I mean. The Last Bookstore on Lankershim. They say Studio City, but it's really North Hollywood. This is really in the weeds for anybody that doesn't know Los Angeles well. But
Right. Well, I'm in New York, but like my audience is all over.
yeah,
Um,
that's good.
but definitely, are you doing any like book readings or like bookstore visits or anything like that coming up?
I not coming up. I did a reading. Well, I had did readings for both books at different times. One was at a brew pub, and that was a lot of fun. And the other was at the Last Bookstore in Studio City. And I've done readings on podcasts. I know you're not set up that way, but which is it's a little strange because the reaction you have no one there reacting. And even though I in college I did radio, so I sort of get that. It's just like, okay, did that fall into the well of silence, or did people like
Right.
it?
Are people even paying attention, or they
Yeah.
take off to get coffee? And
Exactly, exactly. So, but I do enjoy readings, and if I have other opportunities, I'll definitely do them.
okay. All right. Well, I don't want to keep you here all day, but just finally, so people should go to your website. What else should they do? I tell like my phrase is like, my books are find bookstores everywhere. So
Right.
like, should people just look for your stuff, on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, stuff like that?
It's just Amazon. Raventail is basically a print on demand, and they only put it on Amazon. I was able to place the books locally in the Last Bookstore, but it's not the publisher does not put them in bookstores. So that's the only place that anybody that's not in LA can get them is on Amazon. Like I say, there's links to Amazon on my website. And if you really want a signed copy, you know, contact me through my website and I'll send you a signed copy. I just have to figure out what the shipping would be and all of that, but I haven't
But
done
you
that.
could probably order like an author copy, so then basically they'll pay the price of the author copy plus shipping plus probably a little bit more. I don't know. That might it might all add up to like basically sales because I know that when you make a sale, the publisher takes a certain percent and Amazon gives them a certain percent, so you end up not making that much.
Right. Well, I do have I have the books in stock at home because I have been selling them at readings and at conventions and putting some in the bookstore. So, I know how to, I know what I paid for them and know how to price it. I just have never figured in shipping
Right.
before. So,
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for doing this. Do you have anything else you want to throw out there to the sphere to tell people to check out?
no, basically just yeah, read more, buy more books, and watch, and don't buy anything that's been written by AI.
And definitely submit reviews. Like I tell
Yes,
people, I'm like, you can even give me 1 star, but review it.
yeah, yeah, that's very, very helpful. I have friends who like have bought the book and they never bothered to do a review. It's like, come on, I thought you were my buddy.
Right. Help me out. Come on. But all right, man. Well, thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you.
Please like and subscribe before he kills again.